Alrighty, good to go. Thanks, everyone. Cynthia, Sarna, thanks for joining us here. I would say this is European friendly, but it's only kind of like moderately friendly,
like non-hostile,
non-hostile. So, Sarna, I know it's late over there. So, thanks and I gather you got a little one based on one of your recent posts. So, hopefully, thanks for joining.
9 p.m. is my sweet spot. So I really hate when people schedule something for 4 p.m. and I think that it's okay with me. It's actually my family time. Now it's perfect because the young ones are getting sleep and stuff. So this is the perfect.
So not better than non-hostile. European friendly. European friendly. And Tim is here. Tim, how are you?
Not too bad. I only have half an hour. Sorry.
No, that's great actually, because this is a great way to kick it off. Because Tim, I got to tell you, I am just a real bout of renewed gratitude for you because and Cynthia and Sarna, we'll get to the book that you're writing in a second, but Cynthia had tasked me with reflecting back on a bunch of my past blog entries, and it really, in addition to getting us out of the creaking lifeboat that we had put ourselves in after Sun, it really forced me to go back to that blogs.sun.com history, that early history. And Tim, I got to say, because Adam, you were telling me earlier, like, I don't think you said that you would not have been blogging were it not for me.
Definitely not.
And I would not have been blogging were it not for blogs.sun.com.
Yeah.
There's just like no question in my mind. And I actually went back to that kind of earliest mail, Tim, that was sent out to the company, in which Fowler strangely had a conversation with Jonathan in the email. Very, very like strange kind of, I guess I know, Adam, you missed the all emailed world, and I'm telling you that like it was weird. There were aspects of it that did not work.
Yeah.
But Tim, I went back to your kind of the policy that you rolled out, and then your blog, which is obviously still around and up, and I'll drop a link to it. But could you walk us through kind of the thinking about blogs.sun.com? Because that was so personally transformative for me, honestly, and Adam, by extension for you. And so how was that idea born?
Well, John Fowler gets a lot of credit. Now, most people won't know who he is or was. At that time, he was software CTO, I think. But anyhow, he's the guy who hired me at Sun. And he was interested in me because I had a fairly substantial web presence, on the blogging side and the standard side and so on, the open source side. And I was also a loud public voice on the blog. And Fowler was, I guess he's really the guy who had the vision here, who thought that having such a thing would be a good thing for Sun. And when we talked about me coming to work there, he said, "Okay, we need your exposure to web technologies." At that point, Sun's policy was, "Well, for the web, all you need is Java," and also try and get us a public voice. So it all happened very fast. It was like within weeks, I think, or a small number of months, anyhow, after I was hired, that John said, "Well, write us a policy and let's just do it." And
it's fair. That is actually very much in keeping with Fowler. At least the Sun Microsystems Fowler was definitely let's just do it. That was been great to feel like, okay, so I just need to go like write a policy and we're going to go make it happen.
At the same time, it was interesting is that Microsoft had hired Scoble for more or less the same reasons. Now, Scoble wasn't a technologist, which I am, but he was obviously a highly effective blogger back in the early days. And so I forget which of us actually splashed out first. I think Sun did first before Microsoft. But this was the surfacing of social media. Blogs were social media back then, and clueful technology companies realized that there was something to be accomplished by starting a conversation with the world that included your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so clearly Fowler had the kind of the vision for that. And then so how did it actually, what were the kind of the mechanics then of, you roll, because you had said, and I thought it was so interesting to go back and read your blog entry from back in the day, where you had said that one of the kind of sources of reticence in the company is people didn't know, they didn't feel empowered to speak, which is kind of I mean, I always felt empowered to totally shoot my mouth off at Sun, but I guess there were people that weren't. So you developed this policy, Tim, that I mean, going back and just rereading it now, I really love. I mean, it was basically hinging on trusting people to do the right thing. And then the policy was really offering advice on how to do the right thing.
Well, I see Will Snow just popped up. I'm going to bring him into the conversation in just a second. Because the Sun at that point had a fairly conventional public relations PR organization, and that dogma held that the company must always speak with one voice and always in very conventional terms, Dilbert-esque terms actually. About how wonderful everything was and how great everything was, and that was the only thing that could ever be said by anybody. And Fowler just said, okay, you don't have to pay any attention to that, read a policy. As I recall, it took only a couple of iterations, to get the policy where everybody agreed to it. And we started wondering, in some online conversation, oh, how are we going to make this happen? And Will Snow, who was very way up in the IT organization at Sun at that point, stuck up his hand and said, well, I could put a server up. And we used, what was the name? Roller. That was the name of the Java-based blogging engine. And within a matter of days, Will had put up a substantial server with, Roller on it. And Fowler had signed off on the policy. And so we just did it. And boy, it had momentum almost instantly. And it was a success story, to the extent anything could have been a success story in the pitiful state Sun was in at that point. But it was.
Yeah, it definitely was. And Will, it was so great. Thank you so much for joining us as well. It was great to see your name in going back and reading Tim's blog piece. I'm like, of course. And I remember that so vividly now. And what was your take on it as someone who is, because you were in Sun IT at the time, but you were,
No, I wasn't in Sun IT. I was never in Sun IT.
Excuse me.
Anti-Sun IT. Yes, thank you very much. I was in engineering.
Let me rephrase. You were deploying information infrastructure at Sun, but no one should confuse you with being an IT at Sun.
That is correct. Yes. We built the servers that underlay all of the Sun.com sites. But it was a fun experiment. As I recall, Michelle Dennedy was our lawyer of choice. I think she helped work on the policy. And
I do like lawyer of choice because it implies that you went through a couple that were actually like, no, not you. Actually, sorry, I actually need a lawyer I need more of a mob accountant on this one.
Well, that was the funny thing is that actually, as I recall it, that's kind of what happened is we needed somebody who understood that writing a policy that was complex and, full of legalese and 24 pages long was not going to be effective in communicating to the engineering team, right? So they wrote a very straightforward, Tim pushed hard to get a very simple policy put out there and straightforward, and I think it was very effective. Putting the servers
very
up was
effective.
Part of the easy thing.
Speaking of the only legal obstacle we had was one lawyer, I forget who it was, not Michelle, had said, well, of course you're going to have to get legal approval for all the links you put in. Because
oh, Jesus.
and that wasn't totally crazy because at that point there was some rumble about people claiming that, they could put up a policy that meant you had to pay if you linked to them. Obviously that didn't float, but it was a bit of a buzz, and I was trying to not say, you're being stupid. And Fowler just stepped in, I think, and said, no, don't worry about it. So,
right. Fowler would be the one to be like, actually, you're being stupid. So, okay, I wasn't going to say that, but yes. When I think, I did like the fact that because engineers especially, and this is aimed at people who are in the trenches. This is aimed at not only engineers, but folks who are going to speak with, kind of their lived experience from the inside perspective at Sun. And people aren't going to weigh into to legal disputes. And there's already a predisposition to kind of avoid those things. So you don't really have to work too hard to steer people away from it.
That's almost entirely true. By and large, the people who started speaking up did so in a responsible, smart, and entertaining way. They got the idea. There were one or two cases where somebody released a mathematical model that predicted the Sun share price.
Well, I do understand that the SEC might have darkened your door at some point.
Yeah, so he had a short and urgent phone call right then. I think there were 2 cases where somebody went seriously out of bounds, but given that we had like a couple of hundred people doing it at one point, that's not bad.
No, that's not bad at all.
We had more than a couple hundred, Tim, because I actually went through one of your updates to the company. We had over 1,000 bloggers at and that was only like 6 months after starting it. I mean, it was just this is something that the company was really ready for, I think. And
I think the profession was really ready for it.
Yeah, interesting. So what do you mean by that? Expand on that. I agree with you.
Well, at that point, Google, I think, had just launched Blogger too, very shortly after that at some point, and that had this insane growth rate, and there was this obviously a hunger in the profession for human voices in conversation and the kind of things that no PR department would ever go for, and there's also a need, since we have a highly technical profession that's full of our own jargon, you needed people who could actually explain what the company was doing using that jargon. I mean, you just can't talk about dtrace or, the latest activity, or what was it called, application server technology or whatever, or your open source projects without, using a lot of words that no PR person could understand. And it freed people to have conversations in their natural tone of voice using the vocabulary they would normally use. And how could people not like that? And not just the people who got to do it, but the customers who had to try and figure out what their vendors were really doing, not what the PR people said. So, it was like a vast unfilled hole in the ecosystem. Now, it turns out, blogging wasn't enough to fill the entire hole. We got microblogging, we got short form video, we have all sorts of social media now. This was just the first step down that path.
It's really worth orienting folks that this is like pre-Twitter by several years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is pre-Facebook, even really in terms of its breadth. I think it might have been like consigned to specific universities at this point. This was like a Friendster era. Like that was the pinnacle of social media at the time.
This is Friendster. This is Orkut. This is in that kind of period where, and it's interesting to me, you kind of phrase that as like there is like a lot of people are ready for these things, but the things don't really exist yet. So this is like LiveJournal. This is like LiveJournal and Usenet is the world that you're kind of coming out of. And the where this, and actually I went through some Usenet archives, which is so weird and painful. And we, humanity, have made it really difficult to search Usenet. But that was kind of our interaction with people and technologist interaction over Usenet, but not a very good vector for it, and a terrible vector. But the real problem with those conversations is those conversations were essentially never initiated by the technologists themselves. So it wasn't like Bonwick coming on and be like, let me explain something to you let me answer a question that you didn't ask. Right. That's not happening on Usenet. It was all so and there were these Sun forums, the big admin.
Oh yeah. Right. Jeez.
Big admin, now known only in the dead links in both of our blogs to various big admin things.
Yeah. The kind of discourse of its era, right? Like the corporate like Q&A forum.
Yes. So there were these kind of various things, but they were all highly kind of structured, and it wasn't really technologist initiated. So you were missing some of that kind of authentic voice that we. So then Tim and yeah,
it also helped. The web technology itself also made a difference. Having a platform that had some decent typography and you could put graphics in, and do longer form stuff. And had discoverability in search engines and things like that. So you could just say, "Oh, I'm interested in monitoring operating system latency kind of thing," and you might turn up blogs. Blogs got Google juice very, very, very fast. So I think that, Usenet also had cultural problems, but the NNTP just was not a good platform for talking to the world.
It was not. No, you're absolutely right. And I think the other thing that is actually mind-bending about those old days, those early days of blogging, the comments were amazing. Yeah. Like the comments were like productive. And I don't actually, I think I didn't address in my blog post yesterday, but I need to, because Adam, I have these comments and I've got them preserved. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with them exactly. but there, I've got pieces where I'm like, I'm going back and forth with Werner Vogel's, and like everyone is saying things that are like really interesting and productive, and they're like, no Nazis or product placement, or I'm just like,
it's so quaint too to think of this time
so
when
quaint.
the conversation is going to happen like on the dude's blog. Like Werner is going to show up to your blog and just like share his thoughts, and like you're going to have a actual useful conversation back and forth. And that's not happening on Hacker News or other places because they don't exist.
They don't exist. Like it's Slashdot and OS News. It's kind of crazy. And then, Will, were you surprised by the level? I mean, from your perspective, like, okay, I volunteered to put the infrastructure out, and I guess from the .com side, you always had like a ton of horsepower. So from an actual horsepower perspective, I don't know how much of a draw this was, but it was always a very responsive experience.
Yeah, until it wasn't. It was Roller, and it was good for kind of smaller volume, but we quickly realized that it was going to run out of gas, and it did. And as I recall, we really spent a lot of time trying to make stuff go faster. And eventually, I think we changed out of Roller to something else. I don't even remember what we used, but just because we just couldn't get anything more out of it. But it scaled up so fast, it was spooky to the point where I was driving machines up to our data center and putting them in myself.
That is awesome. I'm always kind of thinking, especially with my blog now running on the Oxide rack. I'm like, well, this is actually not the first time that it's been running on hardware that I've, because this was when it, of course, was running on Sun gear back in the day, obviously. But that feeling of like driving gear up to actually allow for expansion, because the demand from a Sun side, from both a people blogging side and from a people wanting to consume the information side, was pretty high, right?
It was very high. If Linda was on here, she'd probably tell you, probably still remembers the numbers. But yeah, we saw a tremendous amount of demand from the internal customers. Were our Sun engineers were particularly demanding.
Guilty.
The writing, the writing part of it is a little bit more resource intensive than actually the reading part. So I think that's actually how we eventually split up some of the load, is actually tried to push off the writing to one server and then the reading onto multiple replicas. But it was challenging to keep up with the demand. It scaled up so fast, it was kind of spooky. Maybe like
Roller was based on Hibernate, a snicker at this point, and it had some bottlenecks.
Some.
Yeah, and then Tim, were you? I mean, as you said, like you felt that the industry was ready for it, but I gather that like even you were kind of surprised by the scope and depth of some of the content that was created.
The thing I was most impressed at was how great the engineers were. That they behaved themselves, and wrote, they didn't require really much evangelism to get on board and write useful stuff. But it was wildly controversial. People forget that now. There were all these highly reputed industry analysts and tech journalists and the Walt Mossbergs and so on of this world saying, oh, is this okay? Is this safe? Are people going to get career damage for doing this? And that was the conventional wisdom, is that anybody who blogged was sticking their neck out and was going to suffer career damage. And I was pretty sure those people were wrong. And so it turned out. But it's social media was not a no-brainer. It was not a controversy-free. Still isn't today.
It's still. I was just going to say, it still isn't today. I mean, I think that the thing is, we would love that every company to have that kind of sense of transparency, but it was unusual then, and I think it's less unusual now, but still unusual. I mean, Tim, you've worked for obviously a bunch of different companies, and you've seen varying perspectives on transparency.
One quickly develops, a skill set at dealing with overexcited PR people.
So from my perspective, I was kind of going back and replaying some of this early history. And actually, it was someone in the dtrace community inside of Sun, Adam, who sent me a note saying it would be really helpful for you guys to get on here. That it was, it felt like I was on there the second it opened, but the reality was like a week later, and hanging back a little bit and seeing like, all right, like, what is this? I'm not sure. But I think I saw so much, so I saw some of that early energy too. And I'm like, okay, this seems like it's worth at least a shot. It does remind me, and I kind of made reference to it in my blog entry. It kind of reminded me of the Twitter Spaces thing. I'm like, all right, I feel like I'm going to a nudist beach over here. Do I like, where do I put my clothes in?
I'm having this flashback. Do you remember this presentation you gave called Guerrilla Marketing?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Did you blog about that? I can't remember.
I never did blog about it.
Yeah.
Actually, I've never spoken about it. But
This is you started blogging. You're like, I think maybe the first in the Solaris kernel team, and then gave this presentation to the rest of the kernel team saying, get on it, you lazy jerks.
Well, because I felt like I could also understand, like I having had a little bit of that reticence myself, and this is a good segue, Sarna, to your and Cynthia's book about like, that reticence to write. And I think that, one of the things that I really wanted to make clear to folks is like, you are not the daily newspaper. Like, you do not have a responsibility to, like, there is no fixed cadence for this.
Right.
And that is actually really important.
Let me butt in here for a sec, because I'm about to leave. Sorry about that in advance, but we've been talking about the past here, and I'm going to leave now. But we should talk about the future too, because one of the things that the 20th and 21st century has taught us is that new media do not just really displace old media. Radio didn't kill books, and TV didn't kill radio, and movies didn't kill TV, and so on. Blogging is just a subset, a minority subset of social media right now, but it's still powerful. And in our profession and in politics and to some extent in finance, a lot of the really serious needle-moving discourse happens on blogs. And just because we have an interesting history, it doesn't mean we don't have an interesting future. I got a piece on Hacker News yesterday. And we're getting thousands and thousands and thousands of hits about Blue Sky, which is obviously a highly material subject at the moment. So let's not make this into a museum tour. That's all.
Definitely, yes. I thank you for that reminder, Tim, and absolutely. And actually a terrific segue, because I absolutely agree with you. And long form writing is very much a part of that, still with us, a very important part of our present, and a very important part of our future. So Cynthia, maybe that's a good segue to you and Sarna in terms of do you want to talk about your book and kind of how you, what was kind of the genesis of that?
The true genesis is we just had a crazy idea and wanted to do it. But the official genesis is we wanted to write a really practical guide that would help people write. And I think the term we used, intentionally ambiguous, was more compelling blog posts. Is it blog posts that are more compelling, or just greater quantity of compelling blog posts? And we thought that if we put our two very distinctively different backgrounds together, we could come up with something that was actually useful.
Yeah.
So I come from the world of writing, and Sarna is the engineer in the trenches who grew to love, or at least accept, writing. And he is a unique species, at least among the engineers I've worked with. So I kind of wanted to capture Sarna in a bottle and share with the world. Sarna, do you want to chime in? I think we came up with it. I proposed it. I looked back to our history. There was, I think, a 5:45 a.m. text to you. I don't remember why I was doing that at that point. And then we had agreed to do it by, I think, like 6:10 in the morning after about 12 more exchanges.
Yeah, pretty much. And it really reminds me of all the book review discussions where Cynthia talks or writes a lot, and then I just agree with everything in one sentence. So that's what's going to happen now as well. It sounded up perfectly. So yeah, we the longer stories that we already kind of wrote another book together before it with more co-authors about database performance, which was purely technical. And we just, I guess, needed more. You just can't stop if you grow to like writing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's so funny because I think you're hearing from we heard from Tim, and I mean, really, a generation removed, right, in terms of the importance of long form writing and doing that via blogs. I think actually, and you were kind of mentioning too, Adam, that the rise of microblogging, I think actually took some of the pressure off of blogging.
Yeah.
Where
also is evidenced in the cadence of our blogging. I don't know if you looked at
the cadence. For sure. And it's like you go look at some of those now that I can actually go see some of those old entries quickly.
Yeah.
Some of them are really dumb. I mean, some of them are really short and really dumb. And the things that would 100% be a tweet, no question, this is or a post. In blue sky parlance, which is definitely where we're all moving to. But I think that it really reserved blogging for that true long form writing. And Sarna, I mean, you tell a great story in the book about how you were really had a lot of trepidation about that long form writing. Do you want to kind of describe what kind of some of your early blog entries?
All right. So my first blog entry was first blog entry ever was just a mediocre tech piece on a feature I added to ScyllaDB. And I was pretty much just forced to do it, or told. I suppose it was nobody ever actually threatened me with anything, but it was implied a little bit. But then I figured that this culture of writing tech blogs about everything that's even remotely interesting, ScyllaDB was very nice, and I wanted to join in after I wrote this first one, and it turned out not to be a terrible experience after all. I thought it might be terrible because I have this very advanced, I used to have this very advanced introvert stage fright that poured even into writing. I thought that if I write something and it gets public, then I'll feel ashamed of it. Terrible, but it turned out it's actually quite okay. And then I just started writing more and more, and where I am now. So it started because I pretty much had to write a post, and then it just went down the slope.
Yeah, and I think you do have a lot of that trepidation, certainly when you're writing something of like, God, I don't want to be wrong about what I'm writing.
Yeah.
Which I think is it's a fear. It's a good fear. I mean, it's a fear that requires you to get really locked in and to get multiple eyes on it and to make sure that okay, I want, review it again and again. I mean, it makes it's obviously time intensive to go do that, but I think it's healthy in a lot of ways. I don't know. I'm trying to think of technically, I don't feel I've had any huge technical gaffes, but it's because I live in fear of them.
Oh, I definitely had a blog post I retracted because I felt like it was such a tire fire. Yeah.
Cynthia, this is in your very thoughtful questions. You did not ask are there any blog posts that you have retracted? What was the blog post you retracted?
So I think it was we were open sourcing dtrace, and there was some discussion about what if this appears in Linux and what's preventing it, and and I think I came up with this very shitty argument about why everything would be fine, and that was pretty much picked apart. And I was like, we're all let's just take a mulligan on this.
Take a mulligan. We're just maybe not, maybe not. But
it was basically our something about documentation. I can't even remember the specifics, but I remember being okay, I'm so mortified of this that I'm going to walk it back. But fortunately, I think going into it, I was really worried. It felt like a big microphone. It felt like I've got sun.com at the end in this URL. I better not say anything overtly stupid.
Yeah.
Then I got that out of my system and said lots of stupid things, and it became easier.
I also think it's really helpful to have a blog because it's very deliberate. You've got the mic is on, but the mic is on.
Yeah.
And I would say that the things I've regretted, didn't quite appreciate how much the mic was on and the tape was rolling. Those you just catching up, I may have shut my mouth off as a 22-year-old on Usenet in a way that continues to haunt me. So that you can't actually go back and delete or edit.
Which actually, that's the nice thing about technical blogs too. If you get it a little bit wrong, and you have it back in the day when you had a discussion in the comments, you go fix it, right? Like,
You go fix it.
and you can own that fixing or not. And it depends the degree to which you sort of like want to live that intellectually honest life. But you can, it's okay to get things wrong.
It's actually okay to get things, that's actually a really good point, is that you can go back and edit it.
Yeah.
And Cynthia and Sarna, I can't remember if you made this point in the book or not, but that's actually something to give people solace about, is that because you can't go back. You shoot your mouth off online in the year of our Lord 1996 on Usenet. You can't go back and edit that. I can tell you that from personal experience.
There's a lot of regret on that one.
There's a lot of regret on that one.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of regret on that one. It's like one of the only things I've written that I regret. And it was done in haste. It was not done. It was like a hot kind of a thing. The
link won't be in the show notes. Don't worry. Like, we'll let people dig that out.
Yeah, let people take it out.
Yeah.
You know what? Usenet is so hard to search. You go find it. It's so much easier, sadly, to find like Hacker News comments that quote it than there are to actually find the. This is, and I do regret it. I have not ever retracted a blog entry. I've not to. Sounds like a value judgment when I say it, doesn't it?
It does. And how would we know? Because that's true. Like,
okay.
Would you 100% remember?
Are you good 11th on me on this one? This is the hill to die. Yes. You know what? This actually is the hill to die on right here. I actually don't. Okay, look, I don't think I have.
Yeah. I don't think you have either.
As far as, and I have, I have had some things that were, and I actually have the benefit of blogging starting at an older age.
I do not have that benefit. I just want to point out I have the benefit.
That's a 5-year difference right there.
It really is.
It really is, actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I thought this was going to be self-effacing, but feel free to join in. But like it's starting at age 22. I go back and read some of that shit.
Right.
God, it's hard to read.
It's hard to read. It gives you more sympathy for one's own 20-year-old, say, in my case.
Yeah. It is. I mean, but it's also normal to be bad at things, right? It's normal to be bad at things when you start and then you do it more and then you get better. Like I tell this to my kids often, but like that's a normal process.
Yeah, and I think we kind of do the world a disservice by not allowing to see the world when we were bad at things. So there you go. All right, that's it. You know what? I'm glad I can't delete that Usenet post. Go back and look at it, and you can know that I too was bad at these things. But the ability to kind of to edit, I think, is really important. And then I think it's like also, Sarna, you and Cynthia in the book, part of what I actually really enjoyed about the book was giving people ideas about kinds of things to write about. Because you often get this from engineers like, I don't have anything to say. And it's like, no, you definitely have something to say, because like you are part of our craft is saying things. Like when we're writing code, we're actually saying things. What are some of the things that, and so Cynthia, do you want to expand on that a little bit? Because I thought you had a bunch of good ways of thinking about different blog entries.
I'll start off by putting out what I said, I think we called it the 3 Ps, things that you're focused on, things that you're either super proud of, pained by, or just otherwise. I think passionate was the word that we were allowed to use, but it might have been another P. And then Sarna went to all the details of topics everywhere.
Okay, so passionate, proud of, and not definitely not pissed off. What was it? Sorry, what was the other one?
It says passionate, but it was proud of, pained by.
Painful.
So
yeah.
Pulling themselves over with using things incorrectly, or just otherwise passionate about all the rants, the roasts, etc.
Yeah, so that's a good rubric. That's a good way to start. I think that is probably many of my blog posts. I think I kind of fall into one of those categories. But kind of tapping into that inner, what stirs you at some level, and how do you kind of find those things? And then Cynthia, you asked me these really great. I mean, I love reflective questions. Do you want to talk about some of those? Because I want to pose some of those to Adam. So I punted on answering them myself because I thought they were too hard to answer. But do you want to kind of outline some of those questions?
I think there were 8 of them. Why did you start blogging and why do you continue? What's been the most surprising impact of blogging for you in terms of, has it gotten you a job? Has it connected you with really cool people, opened up the doors to different opportunities? And then what blog are you most proud of and why? Because I found that a lot of the ones that are most popular are not necessarily the ones that people really are the most proud of and invested the most in. And then when the question I really wanted to hear about was what post was the most difficult to write and how did you tackle it? Because those are always the most interesting experiences. And then sort of the general lessons learned, what do you want to share, blogs you enjoy, etc. But those were really the
Okay, so can I ask you to expand on difficult? What do you mean by difficult?
difficult.
I mean,
Just to, sometimes it's difficult because you're not sure how to, maybe you're coming up with it as you're writing it. Maybe you're writing benchmarks and there's just so much involved from the backside to get into it. Maybe you're writing on behalf of a company and you have to go through, 23 drafts to get past all the different opinions and arguments and personalities and egos, etc. It's an ambiguous term, but
does this not resonate for you, Bryan? Like, were there not blogs posts that you made that you feel like?
Well, so no, honestly, the reason I got kind of hung up on that is because there's so many different kind of dimensions of difficulty.
100%, yeah.
So look, bluntly, when just recently, my most recent blog entry is on a remembering Charles Bueller.
Yeah.
I was weeping as I was writing that blog entry. It's the only time I was writing a blog entry I was weeping.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's
hard.
They got to put that one towards the top of the list, right?
For sure.
But that was not difficult in a bunch of other ways, right? I mean, it's like it was not difficult and then, there were entries that were difficult because they were really technically arduous. Mm-hmm. And I was really trying to get every detail exactly right on blog entries that I'm convinced
you were the only reader.
100% the only reader. 100% the only reader. Where it's just this is why you're the only reader? Because it's technically arduous. It's like people stopped. Like you were not off. You're kind of off the trail over here. People are asking, by the way, is the police car chasing the leaf blower or is the leaf blower chasing the police car? I think it's a little of both. I think it maybe there's a little bit of
actually, mostly people are saying they can't hear them, but
that's great.
But for folks on the podcast, we've had some leaf blowers and police cars,
right? And if the noise cancellation is making us sound like we're inventing those, if we are hallucinating them, it's a shared hallucination, which is always important. So yeah, I think that's kind of why I asked the follow up, because it's like I feel like there's different aspects of difficulty.
Oh, 100%. I hear that, when I'm thinking about the question as well. Like I think of two blog posts. Like for me, the blog post that was hardest was like the one where the inaugural blog post for the company I founded, Transposit.
Interesting.
In part because I felt like it was so high stakes. Like I really wanted to get it right. And I don't know that I did. I wasn't that happy with it. To this day, I'm not that happy with it. And I'm really bummed out about it.
Interesting.
And then it was just hard because I felt like I really wanted to nail it. I wanted to kind of meet all these, there were a bunch of folks who wanted it particular ways. And it was a little bit of triangulation. Then there was another one where it was it took me a week to write. This is the series I did on the Apple file.
I was just gonna say that was such an incredibly detailed series.
Thank you.
And I think if I link to the conclusions, will that?
Yeah.
Will that? Yeah. It will be easy to. Fortunately, Adam, you and I have both moved our blogs out of WordPress, so we're out of the shame. We can actually link to these things easily now. But that was your part 6 on APFS. That was a really detailed series going in from a very unique perspective.
Yeah, I think so. Right,
for sure.
Having been involved in building a file system. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say in both. You've been involved in building a file system, and you're someone who's been a user, a earliest possible adopter of Apple products. Right. This is someone who has used Apple products your entire life.
Yeah. And I was unemployed, so that gave me some time. Actually, that's not true. I was technically employed as an entrepreneur in residence,
which is basically very rich unemployment. Yeah, it's an unemployment check. That's with
good healthcare and stuff.
That's right.
So rude of me to say unemployed. And I got to I scammed my way into the Apple conference and talked to Dominic and to Eric Tamura, who gave a presentation about APFS. So I had yeah, everything was stacked up to make that pretty good. But that took all week. Like I remember where I was doing it, and we had gotten an Airbnb for the week, and I was just hanging out in the woods writing that thing.
So can I ask you about a blog entry that I thought you wrote, but now I can't find?
It might be on the Medium site.
Okay,
because I forgot this. I was doing the same thing this morning. I was like, where's that blog post? Oh, I forgot to move it over.
That's Outposts. Is the Outpost one?
Yeah. I got 2 Outpost ones, but yeah.
Okay, because those are, I mean,
I got to move those over, but yeah.
Because Cynthia, in some ways, it's easier for me to answer these questions for Adam's blog than for mine, because I can go through like the ones that it's really interesting to hear kind of his perspective on. But so do you want to describe the Outpost blog entry, and then we'll
So as I remember it, and you can give your own kind of
my own version of events.
So I was thinking seriously about joining Oxide. Oh,
I already have a different version.
I should rewind. Because
thank you.
So I'm at the reInvent conference, like for work for the startup.
Hold on, are we going to if we're going to rewind? We have to rewind to going to see the Beastie Boys.
Okay, so even further back, here we are. We're going to see the Beastie Boys book tour. Okay,
it is the most Gen X thing I've ever done in my life.
It was the day before the election.
Yes,
and everyone was just like, you look around, everyone was exactly our age.
It was a very narrow. It was like you were born between 1973 and 1979.
Yeah, very very tight band in the audience. So as surviving Beastie Boys members, Rip MCA, book tour, and.
It was so amazing, by the way.
It was wild. It was great. And I feel like I'm sure.
Welcome to the Gen X Story Hour, but it was amazing. Sit down, children.
And then just like these videos that I think probably don't exist anywhere else except for like their personal archives. Anyway, if you get the chance to go to the Beastie Boys book tour in, whatever it was 10 years ago, go for it.
It was outstanding. Yeah.
So we'll go to that. I think I'm like one of us is walking the other to BART.
We're all walking to BART together.
And you're like, I'm going to start this company. And you're describing Oxide. And I was like, he is gripped in this nostalgia. Like we have had this very nostalgic moment. And I was having some things.
Beastie Boys induced.
Like overwhelmed by nostalgia. And you're like, right, I get it. You're like trying to make.
Like you're trying to revive your youth.
Right. And because we just had
you're in a weakened moment.
Right.
I didn't reconnect the two, but like this is some sort of weakened moment that you're in. And it's like, no, you're not. Sorry, you're not listening to ill communication on OC Transpo on the 69 in Ottawa, pal. That's not where you are.
Exactly. I was going to say ill communication driving to high school. Like that's where it was for me. And that
right. This is not about Paul's Boutique anymore. You gotta when are you gonna? MCA is dead, Brian. MCA is dead.
And I think that I was like, what are you going to call it? Saturn Hyper Systems.
You didn't even give me the courtesy of a snide remark. You walked off while I was describing it. And then I caught up to you, described it again, and you walked off again. And I said, we're starting a computer company. And Lucas, who was with us, turned to me and said, he heard you. And I'm like, okay, well, that went over well.
Yeah.
And then I finally I think I said it the third time. You said, what, like super micro? And I'm like, no, not like them. All right, well.
So there we are. Election day, probably 2016 or something like that. No, it can't have been. Must have been much earlier.
No, it's 2018.
2018. Oh, okay. 2018 election day. And then, so that was
midterm election.
So then like a month later, I was at reInvent and they roll out Outpost and I like text you. I'm like, sorry, like they just killed your company.
Yes.
And so then I was
because of Outpost. Outpost just felt like
totally cloud on-prem, like done.
Cloud on-prem from the company with the best execution on the planet at the time.
Right.
Certainly.
Yeah. And yeah. So then they actually release Outposts and I start to break it down back to the blog. I start to break down Outposts by the numbers and did like a lot of spreadsheeting and a lot of analysis of like, what does this thing cost? And it turned out Outposts is crazy expensive. And I was thinking about joining Oxide, but I think that put so much wind in my sails too, to say like, oh no, I should really like this actually makes sense. Like this Saturn Hyper Systems, like this thing might have legs.
So my version of events is you went from naysayer, you went from like, I am going to gather the data to show why this thing is like never going to work. And then in gathering the data, you realize like, this crazy idea might just work. In part because, I mean, aided by their economics.
Yeah.
I mean, like really, that is no tribute to us. That is really like you taking apart the economics. And for a long time, like your blog entry was the best thing out there talking about the economics. And like Steve would,
I think it still is. Thank you very much.
I think it still is too, if I could find it.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't remember where the comment was, but it was definitely like, oh, hey, maybe you should join Oxide. Well, funny story.
That's right. Exactly. But that blog entry was, I mean, I think that's a good example of how this long form writing was that was very instrumental for us both. Like, I mean, was
it's like, dude, this ain't a tweet, right? This is not going to be a tweet storm or whatever.
It's not a tweet storm. It's not a Usenet post. It's not, it really needed to be in this kind of long form that doesn't really exist anywhere else. Cynthia, just like kind of, as I was thinking of like the kind of the many concrete examples, not to do like a full colonic. We doing on your blog history, but
okay.
So made it weird. There are a couple of other blog entries of yours that were, I think, very influential for me personally.
Okay.
One, I love Go, I hate Go.
I know you like, I think you're the biggest fan of that one. That was also on Medium. I think that maybe it was like
that one you moved over.
Yeah.
I thought I love Go, I hate Go captured what obviously captured what you feel about Go. It captures what I feel a lot of people feel about Go. About the, I thought it was just a really good way of like capturing it all. I thought it captured both like the nuance. I mean, and Cynthia, you're kind of like of like, you know, passion and pain. I think we've got like both, like not sure how much pride is here, but you definitely passion and pain are both here in equal measures.
Yeah. I'd also note like semi-employed at that time and like unemployed during the Outpost post. I think there's like a correlation here between like the degree to which I'm employed and the degree to which I blog.
All right. I'll start getting like nervous when like Adam's blog rate is like really far up than he did. So I thought that piece was amazing.
Thank you.
Obviously I have to talk about your Rust piece. From what year? That is 2015, I think. I'm gonna go find.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, okay, actually, before that, because like back to back, I'm not a resource.
there were, yeah. I that one was really important to me. I'm not sure why I was and continue to be so irritated. But like when people refer to engineering like staffing as resourcing, I find it so dehumanizing, and I find it dehumanizing to this day.
I changed my rhetoric. I think I was using that, and I stopped using it after I read that blog entry.
Well, thank you for that.
Because I agree with you.
In part, just like, and we were doing this a bunch at Delphix, and you know, I just like these are not interchangeable parts. Like these are humans, and let's just like give them a teeny bit of dignity by not referring to them the same way we do like electricity or CPUs.
Yeah, I also came to feel developer velocity. I also did. It makes a developer sound like a projectile.
Totally, or just an automaton that like is responsible for churning things out. I don't know, but I get touchy in weird ways. I mean, some of these were also born. You talk about passion. Like I decided that like there was a great animated GIF to be made from like Fight Club about resourcing, you know, like the Project Mayhem, like his name and Robert Paulson. And that was part of the thing that drove writing that blog post.
The other one is obviously the first Rust program pain. So I just think it's funny to go back through with your kind of the three pre-rubric and finding the number of things that are actually like in the titles of these blog entries. But I thought that was obviously a very instructive blog entry, although maybe I drew the wrong, because I read that blog entry. I'm like, wow, thank God Adam did this. I never have to use Rust. Like Rust sounds awful and I am never going to use it. And then you end that blog entry being like, in conclusion, I look forward to using Rust in the future. And I'm like, did you read your own blog entry?
Yeah, no, it was a weird experience. So that's why I wanted to write about that one. And that was one where like the interns we had at the time, a couple of interns from Brown University had been tinkering with Rust and like pushing me to try it out. And I wrote the program. I always write in languages, and I learned a ton. And the funny thing about this is like I looked it up later, and Hacker News Steve Klabnik, my now colleague, is in the comment saying sort of like, thanks for this use report. And
he edited that. As it turns out, you can edit a Hacker News comment years after the fact. Originally, he was just lighting you up.
Look at this.
Just look at this guy. Someone look at this clown over here. But actually, it actually ages well, that post, because even though it just actually is a good reminder of how much more exposed blade there was on Rust in 2015.
I think there are two things on that I think stick with me. One is the exposed blade, like it was harder. The other was, and I wanted to, I want to say nice things about your blog too on this topic of Rust, because
I'm not doing this for a certification.
Just to be clear, so you roast. I wrote this down. You wrote about like rebuilding state maps in Rust.
Yeah.
And the thing, first of all, that was like actually solving like a real problem. And I know that you were like nebulously employed at the time, so it gave you some opportunity.
For a brief moment of horror, I thought that was going to be an unadulterated compliment. Don't worry. Like the left hook.
There you go. But the I think one of the points that you raised, which is something I sort of discovered, was like, don't just approach Rust the way I did. Like, don't approach Rust like, hey, it looks like C or Java or JavaScript, so just like bash your head against it. I think the thing that I like sort of tried to convey, but I think only did a little bit of a job of, but you did a much better job of, is explaining like, go embrace the language for what it is and learn it, and like pick up a book and read about it.
Pick up a book and read it.
And this, I've pointed people to this blog post and given people that advice to this day. In fact, I had a very proud moment where my 18-year-old son, who listeners of the pod will know.
Listeners of the pod will know that it's like this is a parenting podcast about what to do when your teenager's experimenting with C++.
Exactly, right. So we've been experimenting with C++, trying to keep it, safe as best we can. Comes to a talk and
we're in a state where it's legal. So what do you do? I mean, it's like you want to ultimately.
It's so true. I was having dinner with him in Italy, and he's like ordering beers. I'm like, okay, I guess we just do this now. But he came to my talk, and afterwards he said, maybe I should try out Rust. And I was like, first of all,
he was drunk, obviously,
drunk off his ass. So I needed to contain my enthusiasm, but then also say, hey, pick up Steve's book. Go read about it. Don't just like try to bash your head against it.
Yeah. Which I think, that ends up being so that blog entry was really, that was very helpful for me. And I think it changed the way I approach the language. I approach the language like, even because, I was getting excited about it and there was enthusiasm about it. But with your blog entry, I'm like, I need to approach this really deliberately. Because I think what you had said is like, I just tried to kind of fiddle it into existence. And it's not unreasonable. Like, you definitely can do that with, especially, you got a degree in computer science, a bunch of languages.
These languages, right. I've done some functional, some C++, some object oriented, some procedural. Like I know how to program.
There's also a blog entry you've got a blog entry on blogging.
Yeah, I do, from like 10 years of blogging.
Yeah,
like 10 years ago. Yeah. So, some of these blog posts get written in anger or in like response to things, right? Trying to, in this case, this was me trying to take the lessons that Tim was talking about from Sun and bring them to Delphix and trying to educate some of my colleagues. And I was looking back through that. I'd stumbled onto that as well, and looking through like a slide deck I had done on like,
this is a good deck.
I thought, you know what? It was a pretty good deck.
It is a good deck. This is good. I'm looking at it right now. This is good.
And it was like,
stop fussing and post it.
Yeah.
What good advice.
There we go. Advice that I can still take from myself. But yeah, trying to encourage people to just like write about what they're doing and explaining some of the benefits that I had seen. So yeah, that was one I was pretty pleased with.
On social media, first bullet. I agree with you, it's stupid. It is stupid.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. It is stupid. It's absolutely stupid. This is really good.
There's even like a kittens meme that I completely forgot was in there.
I was going to do you the service without mentioning that. I was going to, I was going to walk past.
The depths I went to like convert my blog. I found a presentation I had given on the PID provider. I found on like an old laptop the Star Office, whatever the fuck it was, presentation. And converting it also involved finding what was the Sun font in order to make everything work. Anyway, little side quest for this weekend
for the pain that people go through.
Yeah. If I can say some nice things about you, if you don't mind.
It'd be a little uncomfortable, but
awkward.
Yeah.
Because I have drawn a lot of inspiration from your blog, and I think that this discussion of like I ran my mouth about Rust, and then you said it much more articulately. Because when I went to actually learn Rust, you feel like I gave the advice to go pick up a book. I felt like you gave me the advice, and I wouldn't have heard my own advice to go read the book about it, just for what it's worth. So I think that on thinking, this is going to be, I'm going to say this awkwardly, so hopefully you can clean it up for me. But there are things that you've written about, like forking. Like you've written about forking Solaris and Open Solaris and Illumos, and you've written about open source and the business of open source. And a lot of these things have really clarified, to say it clarified my thinking suggests, it like implies that it's like, oh, I already thought those things and you merely like said them back to me. But in some cases, I feel like the sentiments that you conveyed just like put voice to the things, to the abstract feelings that I had. And I think there are a lot of technologists who read your blog or hear your talks and kind of feel similarly.
Well, that's actually a really good point, because, and Cynthia, I'd be interested to know kind of how often you saw this, because I think that part of why, when you have something that resonates with other people, it's because you've done that.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Like I'm actually telling you something that at some level you already know, or you already think, or you've got a hunch about.
Yeah.
And in like, this is maybe catalyzing your own thinking, but it's not like when I was when things go, part of the reason like you don't control when things go viral or not, when something goes viral, it's because you've spoken a truth. And it's not
you've put voice to something that's already out there.
It's already out there. That's exactly it. And you just happen to like catalyze it a little bit. And now but yeah, that's interesting you said that, because I think that I feel that this is also value you get in reading the blogs of others. We're like, okay, I've been thinking this, but you actually, Cynthia, one of the questions you asked is like, what writers do you like to read? Have you read any of Steve Yeggie's stuff? He said,
yeah.
I mean,
for years.
And like Cynthia, I don't know if you've read any of Steve Yeggie, but I can't remember if he's in the book or not. But the Kingdom of Nouns and Verbs about Java.
Oh yeah,
is just I think is like some of the most amazing writing ever. It's kind of a parable about Java, and then great, like it's like, just as you're saying, it's like it's tacking into kind of like my own like worldview. So I love it because it is and so one of the things that's interesting about Yegi, and I got this question, Adam, for you, maybe Cynthia, this is a question that you were kind of tacking into, was because I realize the way he writes is very different than the way I write, and the way I write may be very idiosyncratic.
How do you feel like? How would you characterize how you write?
I have got 0 drafts. Like there are not drafts right now that I have of like thoughts that are kind of like half formulated that I've written down.
Yeah. For none of them?
For nothing.
Really?
Yeah. Actually went into my drafts because I wanted to go look. My drafts are all things that I published on blogs elsewhere. And I was using WordPress just to get but I literally have which is not to say I don't have things kicked around. I think it's actually like, it's not a strength. It's more of like a peculiarity where I get just locked when I need to get something out. I just get totally locked on it, and it's like I'm not going to do anything until that blog entry is published.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's like certainly early, it was an aversion. Like I would write it and ship it because I didn't want to read it back, and like that's how I was like writing through high school and college too. Like I hated editing because it involved reading my own writing.
Do you know who's well, I'm not sure if it's a great editor or not. Do you use ChatGPT to look at your own stuff?
I haven't, but I should.
You should, because Bridget decided she was no longer interested in reading my blog. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to actually just like, and of course, you and I know both do this, like total Gen X or kind of a boomer kind of a thing, to like have this conversation with ChatGPT before we have like, hey, I would like you to review a blog entry for me. Like, would you be interested in doing that? Like, I would love to do that. I just like, for whatever reason, like that, like back and forth. I mean, I tell people not to anthropomorphize these things, and then I anthropomorphize them all the time.
Yeah. Like, are you familiar with this? Because I'd like to talk to you about it. It's like, go for it.
I would love to talk to you about that. And it's so cheerful.
An error message. Tell me more.
An error message. I've been sitting here waiting like, God, I hope he gives me an error message. And you just did it. Now you've made my day. So yeah, what is it? Like, how can I help? But it's like, it's really interesting to have it read this stuff. And for like flow, and Cynthia, have you done this at all? Have you had ChatGPT as an editor?
Yes, we actually put that in one of the later reviewing chapters because as we were writing it, we started playing around, and it wasn't so great it was awful at writing. It wasn't necessarily great at reviewing, but what was really interesting was if you fed it a blog draft and had it do something like, can you point out some problems with this blog draft? It would give you, maybe 10 suggestions, and 9 of which were just crap, but one of it was like, hey, yeah, I should do that. And you could just get that with, copy paste 20 seconds. It's pretty amazing that you can get that.
It is pretty amazing. I think it is. I always find it most amazing. Like you upload this thing that you've been laboring on. It's like, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, 3,000 words. Have your spouse review it. It's going to be, 15 minutes. And then 15 more minutes. I'm like, no, I'm not changing that. Like people who read this will understand it. But to have it turn around immediately, be like, okay, I read it. And here are my, as you say, Cynthia, like, here are the 10 things. And I find it to be like good. I mean, the when it suggests, I don't take its suggestions that frequently. I often take its suggestions in spirit. Like it's saying like there's a bad transition here. This transition could be better. And here's my suggestion. I'm like, your suggestion sucks. But I hear what you're saying. Actually, you know what? I've been thinking in the back of my head that transition's not very good. I gotta say, like I left the ending of I could not land the plane yesterday on this blog entry. Where I'm just like, because it was a bit.
So ChatGPT wrote it?
No, but ChatGPT, I wrote an ending that I'm like, I don't know. And ChatGPT's like, I love the ending. And I'm like, you know what? All right, ChatGPT, I will publish it. So if you hate the ending, blame ChatGPT.
The only tools I used to use were ones to, they would give you a grade level of the writing back.
Yeah.
Which I found, I see you being skeptic. I really liked it in terms of simplifying the writing. And you're a really, complicated kind of ideas guy.
Just get it out there.
Yeah.
Complicated ideas guy.
But I will, you're going to love this. I have a colleague, and I'm sure you can guess, a former colleague, I'm sure you can guess who it was, who would come back to me and said, Adam, like I wrote this blog post. It told me I wrote at a 13th grade level. Like, how awesome am I? I'm like, no, you numbskull.
I know.
That's the opposite. Like, that's the opposite of what you're trying to do. Like,
I always get grade level like INF, NAN is what I get on the grade level. Those things I always found to be it's like, you have written this for someone who's done like multiple postdocs, someone who actually, I would say multiple PhDs, but I can't even say that. It's like, this is someone who basically everyone knows is extraordinarily smart, but this person cannot get a real job. Really, and their parents are embarrassed to talk about
some
them.
of this is like sentence structure and complexity. I'm surprised that it dings you that hard.
ChatGPT, I'll tell you who does not ding me. ChatGPT don't ding me. And no, because like, look, I mean, fine, we're here. Let's just have it out. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I love the M dash.
You do love the M dash,
and
even though you use it incorrectly.
What?
You put spaces around it.
Okay. You're
typographically.
Typographically incorrect. I didn't think that was God, I thought like,
whoa.
I knew people were just going to hear like muffled noises from the microphones because we're in the same room. We were not normally in the same room. So like this can go into a total brawl right now. And I would lose, but like I would go down just absolutely swing. I love the M dash.
ChatGPT give you shit about the M dash?
Nope. Nope.
Great job. Great job, buddy.
No, admittedly, ChatGPT tells you what you want to hear. But but I appreciate being told what I want to hear with respect to the M dash. No, I had an editor once who at a journal who like ripped out all of my M dashes. It did not go well, and it was protracted back and forth. And this is one of the these types like.
Oh yeah, those types. The anti-M dash types.
The anti-M dash types, like, oh no, but like I've got like a PhD in classics, so you have to listen to me. Like you don't know how to write, and I know how to write. And who gave me great confidence was Caro, reading Caro's Master of the Senate. Caro loves the M dashes, and I think that so the reason I will absolutely have sentences that have got colons, semicolons, and M dashes in them. And
all right, you're right. Postdoc.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, yeah, that's like a lot of words. The reason I do that, though, is because I can hear my own voice in reading the sentence. So it actually has to do with like how I would, I'm telling you as the reader how the sentence should be spoken. We're now in it's like, we are definitely in the question someone asked. I noticed you like noting the time, like I can cut all this out. I can actually, I think I can trim this.
I just want to clip that. I just feel like that is just such a delightful. No, I just want it to be in the music of my.
Listen,
It's
But I
gorgeous.
think that's actually a point that we made, that your voice, might be complex, it might be simple, but if someone who knows you reads it and they don't think it sounds like you, then you've done something wrong with your voice. You don't want to make it sound
you might have another calling as like as a kindergarten teacher, because I love how you're like, no, not saying that Bryan's writing is overly complicated. We're saying he's got a different voice, everybody.
His voice is overly complicated.
His voice is overly complicated. But I
No, but
feel
I think
very
it's
uplifted.
actually called out in one of the chapters where we talked about your blog, that you can just hear you saying it when you read your blog. I think it was the Thoughts on Trends chapter.
Oh, interesting.
So Bryan, that even if your name wasn't on it, you could hear your personality in it.
Yes. Yeah, I do feel I've got I definitely have. I've got a distinctive enough voice. Like I'm sure we both had this, where there's some piece of writing from in the past that is like, who the hell wrote this? And I'm looking at them and like, I know who wrote that. I'm pretty sure I know who wrote that. Yeah. I can go into the Git history to confirm what I think I already know.
That's right. Some block comment. You're like, wait a minute.
That one's got a lot of M dashes in it. M dashes offset my spaces, obviously in a block comment, right?
I mean, you do you. Probably 2 spaces after the period. Like,
are you saying that like if you had an M dash in a block comment, you would not offset that with spaces? That's like a postfix or prefix decrement operator in a block comment. Like, what does that even mean?
Maybe.
You know what?
Maybe.
Blog is canceled. This podcast is canceled. We're going to go straight to Brawl. I knew we would find the things that divide us.
We had M dashes with spaces throughout the book, and the poor copy editors at Manning removed every single one of them.
M dashes with spaces.
Yes.
I went back in and added a bunch of surrounding spaces on my M dashes when I move up. So yeah, I'm glad you did. Do it in front of everybody else. Could you make an announcement?
Yeah, I'm probably wrong.
I eliminate all of our ellipses. So we were guilty of
ellipses.
Things.
I used to use ellipses more. I use ellipses a lot less. The 2 things about my writing as a younger person that I actually kind of don't like. It's my overuse of the ellipsis. And then I which and that. I did not insubordinate clause versus subordinate clause.
Yeah, just to try to avoid the whole thing.
I definitely don't now, but I just misused it when I was.
Oh yeah.
Do you want a good rule for this? By the way, if it makes sense to have a by the way, use which. If you can add by the way, and it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, it's which. If by the way does not make any sense, and it would be just like you'd sound like you had like a stroke while saying the sentence, it should be that, not which.
But also opposite in British English, right? Who cares, right? Good point.
Fuck them.
Yep.
You know what? Oh God, they're on right now. Oh God, we're at a European friendly time. Damn it. No. It's. Then what were some of the other ones? I mean, I feel like so you said that in terms of difficult blog entries, the transposit entry was a difficult entry for you.
Yeah. I do want, while we were talking about editing, I did want to say that like the APFS one was, I went through an unusual editing process on that one, which is I made a Google Doc and I kicked it open to the world. To the world, like to a bunch of like randos on Twitter. And I
can see why on that one, actually.
Yeah, I really wanted that one. I mean, it was long.
And you wanted it to be correct.
Yeah.
And this is like, you're over your skis. I mean, you're just like, I didn't build this thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I wanted, and actually I got a bunch of the feedback that I needed, but didn't want, you know what I mean? Like everyone who participated made it better. So I shared that Google Doc.
Interesting.
Maybe I didn't actually succeed in sharing that, but I'll work on sharing that Google Doc. Yeah, I mean, they gave a lot of feedback that made it a ton better, and it was like annoying to hear. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've gotten that kind of feedback in the past, where you're like actually, I'm just going to start the sentence with an "and" because I'm a rebel. It's like, but it's worse if you do that.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with this kind of feedback. Yeah. I've got this in the past, but that's good because because that was a series. I assume that is still one of your most popular. Series of blog
entries. I feel like while we're all gathered around patting me on the back, it got picked up by Ars Technica, and I got like a $200 check out of it. So that was a good week of work for me.
How did you get $200 check
from like Condé Nast? From Ars Technica picked it up and like paid for it.
I've never gotten paid for anything I've written.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's not totally true. That's mostly true. I got a Business Insider wanted to run my the compensation is a reflection of values piece.
you said no. What do you
No, I said yes,
Okay.
and in return they gave me a 1-year subscription to Business Insider.
That's not getting paid.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I have to get paid in things that can be redeemed for goods and
No,
services.
this is like barter. Yeah,
that is more.
Exactly.
That's one of the barter system, isn't it?
yeah, right. This,
Yeah, they took your island. The beads. It's like, well, okay, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
that's good. So you made $200. There you go.
Maybe even more. I kept that.
So
check.
blogging does
like,
pay.
But like, this from my mom, who has submitted lots of articles to the New Yorker, also a Condé Nast, never gotten picked up by the New Yorker, so I got to lord that over her. Like my mom,
Your mother has submitted articles to the. Go on,
like short stories to the New Yorker,
like unsolicited.
That's like how I think.
Is that how it works?
I don't know. Maybe, sorry, Mom. Good thing she doesn't listen. So,
You know, the New Yorker. Does the New Yorker still do like the caption contest thing?
yeah, I think so.
I feel very wronged about that. I had. Okay, look.
The airing of grievances.
The airing of grievances. Okay, so look, as you know, I don't really. I think grievance is bad. I think it's bad for society. I don't have grievance in general.
In general, please continue.
All right. So obviously, where I'm going with that is to trot out a grievance. I just felt like I had an absolute banger of a caption.
What year was this in which you had this banger?
Oh God, this is a while. They've been doing this for a while, right? This is
They've been doing it for a while.
I mean, because this is shortly after and I know they have like many submissions, but I came to the conclusion based on like, see, you look at the winner, you're like, fine, you found a much better caption than mine. I thought mine was awfully good, but obviously,
did you put it on the fridge like
I should. Okay,
homework?
Okay, so you know what? I can date it a little bit. It would have been like 2007 because the cartoon is there's a monkey at a typewriter.
Okay.
And there's someone who is looking at the work of the monkey. Okay. And like an editor is looking at the monkey and like obviously disappointed. Okay.
Very germane. Yes.
Caption contest. It's like, I feel this is like a classic New Yorker caption contest.
Totally.
It involves an animal. We're anthropomorphizing an animal.
Yeah.
Got the monkey at the keyboard. So my caption, which I feel is a banger, and I won't be talked out of, is, and I suppose this man in the yellow hat, this is supposed to be me.
Banger.
Is that a banger?
Banger. Killing it.
100%.
Yes. It's got so many levels.
It's got so many levels to it. I think it's got a lot of depth to it. And so I was reading a lot of Curious George to the kids at the time. I bet it was fear of litigation. That's the only reason. That's the only cowardice. That is the actual only explanation.
Right. They picked it.
They picked
it to the law.
They fought with the lawyers. I mean, they were like tooth and nail. Like, I got to go to bat for this one. Like, listen, I've let you win on but I got to go to bat for this one.
Could tear down the whole thing. The whole captain would unravel.
But it was worth it. But ultimately, lost.
Yeah,
lawyers won.
Right.
And no, that's okay. No, this makes more sense now. And actually, my grievance is lifted. I no longer have the grievance because
it's been a great session.
I appreciate that anonymous New Yorker employee really going to bat for me. Yeah. Sorry, Cynthia.
If I can drive us out of this ditch for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
So you also, I worry about like pulling on these threads that are like calling out people on blogs because I feel like that can be
yes. For sure.
You had a great blog post where I think that
yeah.
No. This is where you were. There was an issue in the open source community where someone was like arguing over the use of a pronoun.
Yeah.
And
yes.
You were very unequivocal about your stance and about Joyant's stance at the time.
Yes.
And I thought that was great clarity. I thought that was like just like the right way to treat people. And with the topic of how to work with people who are being jerks, how to work with assholes or not work with them. And I thought that really, but that sort of clarity of leadership and kind of just like taking a stance in public, I thought was really important at the time.
Yeah. So a couple of things about that. It's power of a pronoun. Made me an enormous number of enemies to this day.
Huh.
That blog post is the reason that the Usenet post got dug back up.
Great.
100%. Like literally that was like forgotten and like not really retrievable. and it was brought up in the heat of the conversation about that.
Gotcha.
I had that. It actually is funny because I'm glad you brought it up because I'm not sure I would have had the courage to bring this one up actually.
Well, that's why I was kind of anonymizing it a little bit, just because I don't know.
It was. I had. This one I would do things slightly differently, though not with the text of the. This is a good blog entry where people didn't read the whole thing. The people that so I thought that this was going to resolve this issue. I thought that this was, and so to give context, what had happened here is there was a gendered pronoun in libuv, which is used by Node. There was a pull request to change that gendered pronoun from a he, him to a they, them, which is just good writing as far as I'm concerned. Right? I just avoid gender. There's no reason for this to be gendered. It was talking about the user, what the user should do, and then he does this. It's like that, but we don't know the user's gender, right? The user is a they them. So there was a pull request. The maintainer closed out the pull request, saying, "I do not accept pull requests of a trivial matter like this." The maintainer of Node inside of Joyent pushed over it. Took the commit and pushed, and then the libuv person force pushed and reverted it. Gross, really gross. And then I wrote the blog post, and he had also the one thing I would add to that blog post that I wish I had said. Well, there are two things I wish I'd done differently. One, I should have called him. This is an example of me not taking my own advice to you back in the day.
And that advice was basically if I had something nasty to say to someone, to call them. I mean, this is how I'm replaying it. In part because if you put it in an email, you don't know where that email is going to get forwarded.
And I think also it just humanizes them, allows them to get just hear their perspective.
Well, and I think especially and to not let you be ignored. If you actually feel passionate about something, then it forces that person to respond.
He may not have taken the call. The reality is that he had pissed off everybody, not over before this issue, had done things over and over and over and over again to make people, he was an asshole. He had been an asshole. And that is something I didn't clarify in the blog post. It's this guy's got a long history of being an asshole. And I didn't reach out to him privately. And then the other thing I didn't do is, because the maintainer of Node did reach out to him privately, he had responded with a very nasty note. And I don't think I even made reference to the presence of that note. So people didn't have the complete context. I tried to give people a lot of context. I had a lot of people read that one. My wife, Bridget, was like, "I think you're being actually too reasonable." She had the full context. Right. It was it was, as you can imagine, this divided on gender lines for sure. When people read it, I think people thought this is if anything, you're being moderate. Right. That was not an accusation that was leveled in the broader internet. And this one was, I thought this was going to end the discussion, and this went crazy. Absolutely crazy. I got threats. I've never gotten threats before. Really? Anything. Yep. I got people saying horrific things in the DMs, and I'm I'm going to keep my DMs open because this is actually, I have spoken to plenty of women about this who are "Oh, you got, oh yeah. Oh, you got threats. Really? You got threats. Yeah. Welcome to it. Welcome to anything I ever write." And so I felt this is right in the middle of a Gamergate. And it was hot. And I think it changed the way I deal with first of all, I honest hand on heart, I thought this blog, and this is just ridiculous. I'm this blog entry will resolve this.
Perfect. You just lay out all the facts.
I'm going to lay out all the facts, and it will be the end of this.
Yeah, your little Federalist Papers, and
I will write my little Federalist Papers, and it's that did not. And I've got a screenshot of back-to-back tweets being, one tweet saying, one person saying, I don't know who Joyan is, but whatever they make, I'm going to buy some of it right now. Another person saying, I don't know who Joyan is, but whatever they make, I'm never going to buy it. I mean, like literally back to back in my timeline. And it was an education on when you weighed in on something that is really, really, really divisive, it is very hard to, and I again, I don't regret it. I didn't, but I actually did wonder, like, as I realized, like, oh, this is a blog entry that was only on the Joyan blog, was not in my, and it's like, do I republish that with this? So I was just thinking about this a lot this weekend, and I'm like, I know this one is still hot, and I know, and dear listener, this may include you. You may really disagree with me about this. You and I just disagree about this. I stand by it. And if you are someone who is extremely upset by that blog entry, you should know that I have never had a blog entry that more people have come up to me and said that was a really meaningful blog entry for me personally.
That's awesome.
And I don't have to tell you, like, it's women.
Yeah.
And in fact, someone, when we, that you and I both know, but when I first met her, she's like, wait a minute, aren't you the guy that wrote that blog entry? And I'm like,
maybe.
Maybe, go on. Can you give me one or two more sentences?
Right, hum a bar, right?
Yeah. And she's like, I want to give you a hug.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, great. So anyway, that's that one. That one is definitely, Cynthia, as you're talking about, like, difficult, that was difficult in different ways. That definitely has had the most difficult reaction of anything I've ever written. I think that the other things that have been, I think, difficult have been where I've just wanted to be very mindful of it, is when you're kind of like leaving one thing and going on to the next thing. So like my Goodbye Son was difficult in, I do love, and I know this wasn't lost on people that read it, my Goodbye Son piece. So like, he never mentioned Oracle in there. Like, I sure did. And the Goodbye Son, very much a double entendre of basically saying goodbye to not just me leaving Son, but Son leaving me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was also
What
are some of the other ones that you're
let's see. So
what surprised you about blogging? Let me ask you that.
Oh yeah. So you started blogging on Roller, as we talked about. You had this nice kernel technical discussion, this nice presentation where you talked about guerrilla marketing, as you coined it. I think, and then I started blogging, and I was very, don't read those blog posts early, because, man, some of them are just like hard for me to read. The thing that was very surprising is, I was doing a lot of traveling and talking with customers, this in the kind of early to mid 2000s. And I'd show up at customers and I'd start telling them a thing or asking about a thing or whatever. And be like, no, we've read your blog. Like, we're up to date on all that.
Yeah.
I mean, this maybe sounds quaint now, but like the power and distribution of it to the folks who are already invested was novel to me and very surprising. Like, I could show up and instead of having the first 12 introductory paragraphs, just get to the meat and get to more advanced topics or whatever. That was very surprising and really exciting.
Yeah, which is great, right?
Yeah.
You've got people who are like, no, I'm in, right? I'm in. Yeah. Boy, it's been a huge, we talked about, just everything at Oxide has been the ability, because that's like the larger issue of like the merits of being transparent. And
totally. Like, you look at this podcast, like I was at this Rust Lab conference, and there are all kinds of folks who, I started on, this is what Oxide does, or this is, a topic that's interesting to us. Like, no, we listen to the podcast. Like, we got that. Like, we know all this.
Right.
Like, you don't have to do the preliminaries here. Like, we can just get into some of the more.
It's like, okay, well, can I at least explain some of the rule differences between independent baseball and Pioneer League baseball? And it's like, no, we listen to the podcast.
100%. We've got all of that.
We got that. We got a home run derby. Like, it sounds, I don't know. It sounds interesting. It's intriguing. I don't know. I'm European. That's not right. Yeah. Can we move on? Yeah. Interesting. And Cynthia, what was surprising to you in kind of writing the book? Can I turn some of these questions back on you?
Now that Sarna's gone, great.
Exactly. That's right.
Maybe not surprising me, but surprising about blogging is that how important it is as an underdog, especially in the dev tool space, that's really your main way to get mind share away if you're competing against these huge companies, say the Sun Microsystems of the world. and you're some smaller startup, how do you get that message out? And it's really blogging.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's in terms of like, this is your this is what you should think of as marketing. You're trying to communicate what marketing is ultimately communication, and it's a way that as a startup you can punch above your weight with it, with the written form.
Especially in the world of dev tools, or like the folks who are writing those blog posts are also the users of the topic and familiar with it, and building that brand among that same community, for sure.
Totally.
And for fear of dating myself, I actually came into the tech industry in the days of the Dr. Dobbs journals and the C user journals. And all of those.
This is the first time that we've not mentioned Dr. Dobbs journal on this podcast, and what an oversight.
100%.
I was love Dr. Dobbs journal.
I remember going in a day. I came into this tech world, and the founders, they'd print out the articles, photocopy articles. Everybody had to read the articles, make their marks on the articles, and there's the meeting. Do we develop something differently? Do we write something differently? What do we do differently after having learned and discussed all these things coming out? It was such a main force in what everyone was thinking was to get the latest Dr. Dobbs journal and earmark the pages, and what are we copying and what are we discussing?
Yeah, and blogging kind of allows anyone to be Dr. Dobbs journal at any given moment. Yeah, it is total
number of pages. You don't have to go through the editors and like the 3-month-long publication cycle.
And then you obviously all read a bunch of different kinds of blogs, which must have been a fun experience, because I want to go through the book. I mean, obviously, I in writing the foreword, I wanted to read enough of the book, but I did not. I read the book, but not a lot of the source material you link to. I want to go back and reread a bunch of those blogs. Got a bunch of great folks in there.
Yeah, it's a great list. I had fun. The way we did it was I did a super long list of blogs, scanning Hacker News, scanning people on Twitter, just kind of the people in our network, and made this very long list, divided it up into the 7 different patterns. We talked about patterns within the book, because what you're writing for, like a thoughts on trends blog, a roast of async Rust or whatever, is very different than if you're doing a bug hunt blog, or if you're doing explaining Twitter's recommendation algorithm blog to the world. So they're all very different approaches with different goals. So we wanted to tackle them individually. So we came up with all the blogs, we split them up into that, and I think there were probably about 20 to 30 blogs in each category. And then since Sarna was the one doing the write-up, I didn't want to pretend to be the engineer or have the engineer voice. I let him pick and choose and do the write-up. And that's how we got the 5 in each chapter, as well as we had 5 that we did a very extensive discussion of in chapter 3, which was kind of the what makes a blog captivating. That was actually the hardest chapter to write. We left that one to the very end because we wanted to go through all the other chapters before we were finalizing our response on that.
Yeah, interesting. And what was your conclusion? What is it that makes a blog captivating?
We boiled it. Well, we had lots of long lists, and we went over it many, many times. Let me see exactly how we rolling here. But basically, I think the 3 main things that we came down with were, number 1, it has to be an intriguing topic, or nobody's ever going to click into it, and there were a few subcategories in that. Number 2, it has to have a very distinctive educational core. And then 3, we rolled up under, it just has to be very smooth delivery. And I think there's a couple, let me see if I can copy the excerpt or share the excerpt somehow.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, my big advice, because another thing you had asked for was like, what is my advice to bloggers? 1, seriously consider a static site generator. I mean, that's been great. God,
we should have done this so long ago.
We should have done it so long ago. So Cynthia, I don't know if you saw. It sounds like you saw the blog entry from yesterday. You've now played an outsized role in both of our lives.
Well, you have in ours, so we're thrilled to have you.
Well, you inspired us. I'm like, I got to get to a better spot, because people are going to read this book. They're going to click on the link. It can't take 35 seconds to load.
Yeah.
it can't look like garbage because the CSS is like the stupid.
We went from Roller to WordPress, and it was sort of fine.
It was sort of fine.
And then we would
less fine, and less fine,
and then we'd get like these security vulnerabilities where like all the comments were like Viagra ads or something
in Chinese.
Yeah,
Chinese Viagra ads.
I mean, it's true. I guess.
Yeah.
And then we like got it to a slightly better place in WordPress, but it was awful. And
it was awful.
Just like it required constant care and feeding.
That we were not giving it,
which we were starving it.
We were starving it, and so it was just awful. And like it was just bad. So Cynthia, thank you very much, because we had to get somewhere else, and then it was very helpful for me to see your links in the book. I'm like, these links have to work, like whatever they are, like those links had to work. And actually, when I did the original import, like the time zone was wrong, and so depending on when I blogged it, like the date would be wrong.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that won't work, because Cynthia's got like I cannot ruin the book here. But so it was very helpful. So I would say like use it. I mean, I love it was just a breath of fresh air.
What did you use?
I used Hugo.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great. And I use you liked 11T.
Yeah, I liked 11T. We had used that at Transposit. I had committed to the repo, so I felt like I had to do it. I don't know. Like I feel like once I mean, this is the power of open source, right? Like once you make one commit, you're just you're a diehard.
You're diehard. Yeah. So you're an 11T diehard. Yeah. And then the fact that we got it was just a lot of fun to deploy it on the Oxide rack, which is great too. So that was really it felt very rewarding. But sorry, so that's obviously one piece of advice. Is definitely look if you want to write a blog, WordPress is almost certainly the wrong fit for it. I gotta say, I think WordPress does so much that's not writing a blog.
Why would you do that in 2024? Like, why are you doing that?
Yes,
especially as like a technical person, right? Like I get it if it's like a static site is like somehow beyond your reach, fine, whatever. But like if you're happy with Markdown or ASCII doc or
because I think you and I both wish my blog entries had been in Git a long time ago.
Oh yeah,
what we're doing.
And I mean the other thing I'd say is part of the reason when we did this conversion from WordPress that we didn't do it is I thought it would be a pain in the neck. And I thought it would require a lot of futzing. And it wasn't really a pain in the neck. And it was a time-bounded amount of futzing. And it could have gone on indefinitely, but fortunately, at some point, I put down the futzing.
Well, and there was a very helpful script, that WordPress exporter script that I linked in there. And it's in my blog entry, put in the show notes too, because like that thing is super valuable. That was great. Lone Korean. Love Lone Korean. Okay. That's his GitHub handle.
All right, sweet.
Very, very, very helpful. Beauty of open source. But what was what other advice? You have?
I mean, obviously, like do it. Like I don't know. Like if you have something to say, like say it.
Yeah,
and say it to. I mean, the thing that I had told Delphix folks back 10 years ago, and I think is still true, is like know who you're speaking to, because I think one of the things that makes a post hard for me sometimes is when I'm not clear on the audience, when I'm trying to just speak to too many constituencies seemingly simultaneously, it makes it hard to like kind of triangulate what you're writing. But I think knowing who you're speaking to or having somebody in mind was helpful for me in terms of just like clarifying the level of technical detail or the language or what I'm presupposing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I am just sorry. I'm slightly distracted by the fact that you and I have same blog entries on the same kind of events, so people can do the whole Rashomon thing of like, and in particular when Scoble interviewed us on the D-Tray show, or on his show rather, the Scobleizer or whatever, before he got that. He's been in scandal, right?
I don't know.
just like noting the time, edit, like Robert,
if necessary.
If necessary, if Robert Scoble has not been in scandal, edit out. But you've got a photo. So I have a photo of us outside. Now I remember this now. My now senior in high school was just born. So I had the photo of the three of us smoking cigars. You've got a different photo of you, Mike, and me, and you two look like prisoners.
Oh, I remember this. This is like, and he had said something basically like, D-Trace is going to be great for like the environment or something like that. And all of us have this look on our face that I think you described as like each of our tells. Like if you are playing poker against us and like we make the face that we're showing in this video, like that's when you go all in.
That is great. Because I guess just, and maybe I need to, because it looked to me like you two are there against your will, and I've been set in to torture you by reading aloud from my past blog entries. It's like, go and send Cantrell in. They'll both talk. They'll release their secrets. But anyway, good advice. No, so know your audience, and just do it. I think, I gotta say my advice, because the surprise that I had in going through all of my past blog entries is just the amount of humanity involved.
Yeah,
like literal birth, literal death, literal, beginnings, endings, launching things, wrapping them up. It's just like the most human part of the stuff we do.
Yeah.
And it was just like dripping with it. And I was a little bit surprised to the degree that was true when I could kind of line them all up. And, like I had forgotten about John Burrell, for example. I shouldn't, the way we'd worked closely with him and he suddenly passed away. And
John Burrell, who ported
just to FreeBSD. Yeah. Who we all owe a huge set of gratitude to, because there was a lot of work. But I was a bit surprised by that, and it just did remind me of speak from the heart, not from the book. It's like it, and so I would almost counter. I think you're right. Know your audience, but if your audience is potentially 0 or 1 people, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's okay too. And I think, as you alluded to earlier with your sonnet to the M dash, I think speaking in your voice, having your blog should sound like you.
Sound like you. Yeah.
And
you sound like a turkey. You sound like the kind of person that doesn't that offsets an M dash with spaces. That's just who you are.
I mean, the greatest, I think, you talk about surprises. One of the things that was surprising, the utility of it was clarifying my own thinking. I talked about your blog post, helping to clarify thinking as well. But just needing to write it down meant that when I was talking to people about these same topics, I was so much more articulate, because I had already, put it into sentences and paragraphs and organized it in a reasonable way, and had that opportunity to think about it as a story from beginning to end.
I do think you're going to like my foreword for Cynthia's book.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Cynthia, I got to tell you, I think I enjoyed writing the foreword. It was. Thank you very much for the honor of doing it. Do you want to maybe give Adam the punchline from the foreword?
You're not writing enough. And we've actually borrowed it. Mostly Sarna, has created this, maybe a Hacker News takeoff, shall we say, called Write That Blog. I don't know if you've seen it, but we're trying to continue the tradition of doing the somewhat snarky commentary on recent blogs, and you have the headline there.
Oh, look at that. Well, this is great. Right. Okay. So this is writethat.blog for listeners. Yeah. And it is me quoting Pat Helland, who is quoting Jim Gray. So that was I heard at Jim Gray's memorial service about you're not writing enough, and actually went back and got the original quote from Pat Helland. And I thought it was, really good. It's like, there are truisms. And that is a truism. We're all not writing enough, and we're all not reading enough. And Cynthia, this is a great note to end on, because I love that. This is what a great collection of. This is great. I mean, there are things I love about Hacker News, but it's not merely a collection of long form technical writing. There are also some things under that may be a little bit more. And this is just a collection of long form technical writing. This looks great. Well, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Sarna in absentia. I know he had to go. I know it's getting late over there, but thank you very much for this. Again, it's a terrific book. People should pick it up. And Cynthia, what's the story? It's the electronic book is available now. Physical book is coming in the new year. Is that right?
Painful. It's actually been pretty much written since June. Then it got into a production process and whatnot, but bottom line is it's going to the printers in just a couple days, and at that point I think we have the electronic version available within a week, and the print version should be out by the end of this month or December.
Awesome. Well, people should look for the book. I think it's a great one. I think it's very thought-provoking. I loved your questions for us. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for shaming us to get out of the jalopy that we were chugging around in, because it was long past time.
But that forward is just amazing. I mean, just haunting. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for reading aloud the note that I sent you. It's like, please read the following aloud in front of Adam.
Haunting, say many.
Haunting phrases. Yeah, it was. No, thank you very much. Well, again, it was fun to write it, and I felt like I was really just channeling the late great Jim Gray there, and his advice for us all that we're not writing enough. So. On that said, you are listening enough. You can. I'm like, haven't I listened to enough? It's like, yes, you have, dear listener. And Cynthia, thank you again. Adam, thank you for a special daytime edition.
Oh, that's great.
So as you said, like we can go as long as we want because I'm only missing out on work now. Now I don't have to feed. to feed.
I told you about my productivity when unemployed.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I expect some good blog entries out of you. You blogging resource you. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We will not be next week. We're off because I'm out for Thanksgiving. But I will say that just to give my quick plug, I'm thankful for Hugo and the static site generators, and I am thankful for these scripts. We will catch you in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.